Welcome, Adam.
Thank you for having me, Karen.
It's my absolute pleasure.
I'm honoured to be here.
Fantastic. I love what you're doing, and there's not enough, I guess, programs or genuine things out there for men, where men can truly be themselves. So I absolutely love that. But you didn't, there's no but there is a but you didn't start there. Like, there's a lot of exploring that you had to do before you came to that point. And 30 years of searching, that's, well, they say that, don't they, that we take a lifetime. It's a lifetime of exploration and discovery. But I think there are points where we, like you, 30 years, where we hit on something. We have this realization. We think, oh my God, why didn't I see that before? And now I can teach other people and share it. So what triggered that 30 years of, I'm going to say, exploring being human?
Yeah, huge question. And I recently got asked this as well, and I got put on the spot with it. So this is one of the few times I'm going to be prepared for a question. I think it started with being a child of 8 years old and starting my martial arts participation. So my parents took me along to a judo class in the western suburbs of Melbourne, in this old community hall that was effectively looked like a big water tank turned on its side. So you can imagine, it was Melbourne, so Melbourne's not a hot place, but it was hot in there. Yeah. It was hot. So judo, and I think it was like $1 or $2 a session. It was no one was trying to make any money out of it.
Yeah.
And so that started me at a really young age being interested in Eastern martial arts, first of all, because there's fighting and throwing people and all of that kind of stuff, and Bruce Lee movies. But then it became about Eastern philosophy. So I started investigating Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism. And then that moved into India, which was like a deep dive, because as soon as you get into Hindu mythology, there's a god for everything.
Yep.
So at first it was this thirst for knowledge and an investigation of all the philosophical ideas in and around life. And I actually went Eastern first before I came back Western and had a look at some of the darker stuff that the Western crew got into out of Europe. So that's where it started. And I think part of it was, as a young man, I held a lot of anger, and I didn't know where the anger came from. Nor why I responded in that way all of the time. It was my default setting. If something went wrong, my mum would always say, you don't defend, you attack. In fact, attack is your best form of defense. Just go at people all the time. And it all came from anger, and I didn't understand that. So I had to learn how to investigate that, because it wasn't working very well for me, not at work, not in relationships. I had a number of romantic relationships that fell over, and it wasn't their fault. It was my fault.
Yep.
So as a young man, I had to investigate that. And as you say, this idea of being a men's coach, a leader in the men's space, helping men find themselves, is only a recent thing, because I'm a big believer in lived experience.
Yep.
So I had to do that living as a man, working out man stuff.
Yep.
To be able to lead from a place of knowing some part of it and being honest and open enough to say, I'm still making up a lot of this stuff as I go along.
Yep. Yep. Well, I think all of us are. I think if we're going to be honest, it's only to be able to teach something, you only have to be a few steps ahead of somebody else and give them some value, and it's still worth it. But I think when I'm hearing you talking about judo and all the fighting and that, and it's this sort of, it is, very attractive to young boys. If I fight and I learn to fight, I can win the fight, and that sort of stuff. And it has been for a long time in the Western world. I'm not going to say the Eastern world, but in that boys are, they're raised to be fighters and be tough and to, all this kind of be macho and everything else. And it's funny because, well, most of us women, not all us, most of us women absolutely bloody hate that. It's kind of like, why do you have to be such dickheads? I'd have to be like that. But
and it's interesting from this perspective, the male perspective as well, because the modern world doesn't want masculine men. And we've gotten a bit confused between macho and masculine. And I can understand not wanting the macho.
Yep.
But there's nothing wrong with the masculine.
Yep.
And boys wanting to fight is a very natural thing, but channeling that, same as I talked a moment ago about my anger. Well, if I can channel that, I can have righteous anger and use that to power some kind of purposeful activity.
Yep.
Rather than just flying off the handle and smacking someone down the street because they cut in at the roundabout or something. That doesn't make any sense. That's crazy behavior. That's silly.
Yeah.
So there is this, like, I can understand women saying, let's stop being a dickhead, mate. I get that. And then there's the flip side of, well, what am I supposed to do? It's very confusing as a man.
Yep.
Our fathers, so my dad was born in the 50s. I was born in the 70s. My dad came from that very blokey Australian culture. His parents were immigrants, lived in the country, worked on a farm, very tough. So he didn't really share any of the more vulnerable, we might say, feminine kind of qualities with me.
Yep.
Not because he didn't want to, it just wasn't part of his upbringing.
Yeah.
Then you keep going back. I mean, if you go back to his dad, he grew up in the war in Poland. So he fought.
Yeah.
So you think, I'm not that far removed. But my dad was close to being drafted to go to Vietnam. So he almost fought. And a lot of his friends or people from his generation did. So there's a bunch of men my age. So I'm 45 now.
Yep.
Maybe by the time I'm 50, I'll work some of this stuff out. Yep. We come from, many of us, from broken men who've been to war.
Yep.
So, and that is, some people talk about ancestral wounds.
Yep.
Now, whether that comes down in the genes, whether we just learn it by osmosis, living with these men in our families, we still carry it. We still carry it. And now what we're doing is we're navigating this world that says, don't be so blokey. Don't be so aggressive. Settle down. And so is that stripping the masculinity from men? Because there's pluses and minuses in that. It's like if we look at femininity, and that doesn't have to be in a woman because there are aspects, right? There are positive and negative aspects of femininity, much like there are of masculinity. So it's for many men, especially the men I talk to who are investigating this kind of material, it's a tightrope to try and navigate. Like, society wants this, my partner wants this, my kids want this, I want this, dad taught me that. So it's interesting. It's like spinning plates.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I think it's I think in a perfect world, everybody should be in touch with their masculine side and their feminine side, and we just live as we are, and we just not overexert on either of them, and just be at peace and at balance with both. In an ideal world, that would be absolutely fantastic. Now, the stuff you're talking about too, women have gone through this for years and years. Don't turn up in jeans and don't do this and don't speak like that. And to be a woman, you have to do that. So it's kind of and men are kind of now experiencing some of the same stuff that that women have endured for a long time. So but I think that women are a lot better at seeking help and listening, and taking advice. And I don't mean taking advice, don't wear jeans, that kind of thing, but taking advice to, maybe I could do more to make my life better. Maybe I could listen more, maybe I could take that on. And I'm not saying all women, I'm being an absolute generalist there because, I know some that are just not like that. But a lot of men have been taught that I'm not going to reflect, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to look at my femininity, because that's weak. And I'm not saying it's weak, but that's what they've been led to believe, that it's a weakness to do that. So I love what you're doing, because I think that we need a lot more men just to show more vulnerability, to show more openness and more heart, like what you're doing. So I loved it. What were some of the key turning points along your way this 30 years, like were there sort of things that smacked you in the head? Speaking of judo,
probably a person smacked me in the head.
There were real turning points for you.
It's an interesting one, because I have a very organic way of moving through life.
Yeah.
And instead of banging up against something, I try and flow past it. I mean, I try, I do my best. Every now and then I just run into the wall with my face and then I have to pick myself up. But I think I mentioned before, like my first really serious relationship, which was out of high school and into university, that went horribly wrong at the end. So that required me, and I spent a good 2 years out of relationships trying to work out what that was about and going through all of, it's almost like a grief cycle.
Yeah.
First, it's her fault. How could she do that to me? Before I work out that the control's not out there, it's in here.
Yeah.
And what can I do about that? So that would be one. So there's a 20-something-year-old, 20-year-old, 21-year-old man trying to work it out. And then again, I followed the recipe as a young man. I went to high school and I behaved myself. And then I did as well as I could. And then I went to university and I got my degree, and then I went and got a job. And didn't really enjoy the job, but I went and got the job. So, there's a turning point in that where I worked out, I'm getting really frustrated here in this job. There's a reason for that. What's going on? I think I need to pull the pin on this. And so that was take off to London for a year and work some stuff out.
Yeah.
So that was a big one.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I could, if I sat here and thought about it in some silence, which probably wouldn't make for a great podcast, I'd think of more.
Yeah.
But, there's the big stuff. Like, of course, there's the major milestones like getting married and then trying to work out, how do I live with another human being and create as great a relationship as we can together? Yeah. How do I navigate her emotions and my emotions and her needs and my needs and her wants and my wants? And then you throw two grenades, being my children, in the middle of it. And they are beautiful grenades, because as soon as you feel like you've got it worked out, they'll find something else to blow up. And they're the most beautiful little souls in the world, but it's not easy. So they came along. That's a turning point. I can remember when our firstborn, my son Will, came home, and we sat him on the lounge room floor on a pillow, all swaddled, and we sat on the couch and just looked at him. And at one point we looked at each other and said, now what do we do? We didn't get the instruction manual with that.
Yep. Yeah.
That was an experience. So all of a sudden how old was I? 32. Still don't really know how to tie up my own shoelaces as a man. And now I'm a husband and a father. I better put my big boy pants on here and work some stuff out.
I love it. Yeah, we've got a couple of teenagers, so I love the grenades. Yeah, I'm gonna use that one. But it's sort of, I think it's with everybody, isn't it? That as you're going through life, it's the turning points are the times when you really experience pain, or you're really fearful of experiencing pain, and that's when you stop and reflect. And otherwise we just keep going blindly through everything, but we're so hell bent to avoid pain, that some of us will stop and reflect, and some will just smash all the way through it and hurt others as they go. But so you've held many spaces, mostly in well-being, and was there a specific moment that made you think, I need to focus on men? So, you're doing all this healing stuff and everything else. Well, what was it that went, I need this to be about men?
That's a really good question. So I moved to Noosa, Sunshine Coast, I should say, because I'm just out of Noosa 6 years ago, give or take. And it was very much the sea change, get away from the environment that I was in Melbourne and the kind of people that I was around. I had a great circle of friends, and yet not exactly what I was looking for. I'm still in contact with some of them, but not all of them. I didn't like the environment, didn't like space, so I moved up here. It's much more relaxed. There's sunshine. We're 5 minutes from the beach. And, the beach solves everything as far as I'm concerned. If you think something's going wrong, stand at the beach and you work out. It's not that big. That's big. Your stuff's not that big. When I got here, I found a men's group. And it was the first time I really sat with a group of men who talked real shit, who didn't talk about the weather, who didn't talk about how many women they'd had sex with, who didn't talk about the footy, the rugby, the cricket. All of those things are quite amazing. I'm interested in all of those things, but I don't only want to talk about that. And so we shared our stuff. And this is where the work is.
Yeah.
Men learning and understanding that it is okay, that vulnerability is not weakness, it's actually strength, and it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
People have this misconception about what that word even means.
Yeah, they do.
You know, I would say someone, you know, like think of your alpha male special forces soldier, and he goes out of the frying pan and into the fire. He's vulnerable.
Yeah.
He just has some tools to handle the fact that he's vulnerable. He knows he might die.
Yeah.
And it takes him courage to do that. He knows he might get hurt. And there's an analogy there. The vulnerability is knowing you might get hurt, but still traveling that path.
Yep.
That takes courage and strength, fortitude. So we misunderstand that. So I sat with these men, and I'd been coaching people in a gym. I'd been coaching martial arts. I'd done business coaching, which kind of morphed into psychotherapy because it's never about business. It's always about the person.
Yep.
And then it just sort of came to me that I can affect change with men because I understand the experience of being a man.
Yeah.
And I've worked in a therapeutic context with women. I love it. But I don't understand the experience of being a woman as deeply as I understand the experience of being a man.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was more intuitive than intellectual. I kind of felt into it, and I felt that's where the work was.
Yeah.
And that if I can help one man relate better to his wife or his partner, his children, his community, his father, his mother, his brother and sister, that echoes out. So whilst I might say I'm helping men, I'm helping the women around that man as well, and the men around that man as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like my little wedge into the world of helping people.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And you're right, because it's not any healing that you do or any therapy or any groups or conversation, anything that you do, it's not just helping you. It's always helping the relationships around you. And yeah, I love it. Now you talk about wholeheartedness, right? And that was in the intro, and that and that's on your website. You're very wholehearted, and you also say that you're helping men move from their head to their hearts. So is it a common issue for men to be sitting in? Because I'm not a man. You're the one that has the experience. Is it common for men to be sitting in their head and just maybe disconnect their heart mostly, or not really pay attention to it?
Yeah, I would say predominantly. I would say I don't know of many men that I have met that haven't done some serious work that are by default in their heart space.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to be what happens.
Yeah.
It seems that to find someone who's coming from the heart has done work to get there. And I think that's a consequence of what we're taught both explicitly and implicitly as boys.
Yep.
We're taught to be problem solvers. We're brought up to be providers, protectors. Yep. All of that requires a tool that fixes something. You don't fix with your heart. You fix with your head, your brain, your mind, your thinking, your intellect.
Yep.
So all of a sudden we become problem solvers. And there's that beautiful it's a beautiful problem where you think you can outthink your thinking by thinking more.
I love it.
Because that's all we know. Oh, so it's a problem. What's the problem? I think too much. What are you doing about it? I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about. How's that working out for you? Let me think about that some more. It sounds crazy. It sounds crazy. So I use and for some people it's metaphor. For some people it's real. And we can talk anatomy about the heart mind and heart space and the heart intelligence. Or you can talk about chakras. You can talk about all of this opening up.
Yeah.
One of the things I use with men sometimes who get a little bit confused with the language is to say it's the difference between intellect and intuition.
Yeah.
And for some guys, it's best to say, have you ever just gone with your guts and it's worked out okay and you didn't censor yourself and overthink it and say no, like you just went into it and it was perfect.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. So that's kind of what I'm pointing to. And I think it's really important. because we need to live in both spaces.
Yeah.
The difficulty that I see is, and this is from Ram Dass, who is, he's my guru without him being my guru, right? This guy that just went and found a real true guru and then brought the knowledge back. But he talks about the mind being your master, not being your slave. And that's part of the problem. If our mind is our master and we let it do all of the doing and it runs the whole show, then we're in trouble. But if it becomes a tool that we can use and we can become the master of it, just like our lungs breathe for us, our heart beats for us, our eyes see for us, just let our brain think for us, but don't make it run everything. So how do you do that? Okay, start feeling.
Yep.
Get into the heart.
Yep. That is so true. That's so true that by default, we let our brain do all the work. We do. And when it is our master, like unless we've done some training or unless we've become aware of it and then started to shift that focus and started to really take charge of what we're thinking, because most people don't think, what am I thinking? Most people just let the thinking happen and we just do it and we follow it and we're always getting ourselves into trouble. But it's once we actually start asking the question, well, wait, is that correct? Where does that belief come from? Why am I thinking that? It's not until we start asking the questions that we can start to have some control over our mind. That great saying, don't always believe what your mind, what is it? Don't always believe what your mind says or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is, but I agree with that completely. I remember reading it might have been a Buddhist book or a meditation book where they were talking about, we've got all of this science, we still don't know what thoughts are.
Yeah.
We don't know where they come from.
Yeah.
And this book used the analogy that it's almost like your brain or your mind, if we move away from the anatomy, that your mind is like a radio that picks up signals.
Yeah.
Because how many times have you had a thought that was ostensibly your thought, but you have no idea where that came from? It's not you. You would not even associate with that as part of your personality.
Yep.
Like the thoughts I've had of like beating someone up because they sneezed at the movies or something. I'm like, where did that come from? I'm not a violent person. I enjoy martial arts and violent movies, but I don't go around having fights. So why have I got that? And then the next layer to that is, if I let myself judge that thought as if that's me, then I'm going down the rabbit hole. And I'm starting to get into a shame spiral. I'm starting to value my own worth less. I'm starting to have ego problems, right? Challenges around my ego. And then I have seen, and I still see that that kind of a spiral can lead to depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
Because effectively what's going on is there's just so much going on between the ears that you can't deal with what's coming. And it presents for most people, one of two ways. You either go up and you think too much, or you think too much and you go down.
Yep. I think that you're probably getting intuitively picking up on my thoughts when I'm in a cinema and someone's sitting behind me munching on popcorn with their mouth open. So you're probably getting my thoughts.
Yes. I've actually gotten to the point in cinemas where, I used to sit with feeling really frustrated and angry, like you're making too much noise. But I worked out recently that just use your voice, and you don't have to be rude, mean, nasty or anything. I went into a cinema here. There's no one in the cinemas around here. It's so quiet. And two ladies sat and talked like they were in a coffee shop. And they were just next to me. And I just walked over and said, "Excuse me, ladies. I appreciate you might be having an important discussion now, but you can go outside and do that. Because I'm watching this movie. I've paid to watch this movie in silence." And they gave me the and then just left. There was no argument.
Yeah, but all right. No,
didn't have to choke them.
Yeah, see, now I want to judge because I'm kind of like, why the hell would you go into a movie and start talking? But anyway, let's get off that.
I don't know.
We're both going to drag our egos into it if we don't shut up. I love it. So how are you helping men, to get into their hearts? Like what kind of?
Such a good question, Karen. There's so many doorways in.
I'm full of good questions. It just is.
Okay. So this is one of those, there's a little bit of it depends, because it depends where men are on the path.
Yeah.
So I'll give you two processes that I use. The first one is I try and pull people away. I try and pull people, not just men, away from mindfulness and meditation at the start.
Yep.
Because there are misunderstandings about what they are.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden the mind gets involved again and starts judging if you're doing mindfulness or meditation right.
Yeah.
So I will ask a client to sit somewhere, preferably on a cushion, because it's slightly different. They're not the dining room table. They're not lying down on their bed. It's disassociated from other activities, and do nothing. And I say literally no space thing. Do no thing.
Mm.
So it works on many levels. First of all, it gives the chance for the mind to just go off the leash. Mm. And even with no instruction, at some point, that person becomes aware that their brain is going berserk because it's been given the opportunity. The other thing that happens with even in that small time of 5 minutes, the brain gets to do its thing. So all of a sudden it's easy to fall asleep at night because that's not the quiet time for the brain to do its dance. You did it earlier.
Yep. Yeah.
And there becomes this experience of, hang on, I do have the time for this, to allow for myself. Mm. And when you think about it, what's happening is the mind's doing its thinking, but the activity is sitting still. Mm. So there's something about what's going on in the body. Mm. So for most people like me, 45, as I said, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a grappling martial art. So if I sit still with a decent posture, the left side of my back will play up. Mm. So I've got to sit there with that discomfort. Now I can choose to move and do something about it, or I can just sit with it and I can lean into the discomfort. Mm. Now, for a client, I don't have to explain that. I let them find that themselves. So that's one way in, which I find to be really interesting, because there's no layering of this is what you need to do. Follow the breath, count to this, say this mantra, sit this way, look at a wall. There's no structure other than sit still. Yeah. And honestly, if you move around, that's okay. Mm. If someone says to me, I don't have 5 minutes, I'm like, well, give me 2. Just give me 2. Yep. And then maybe 3 next time. And then the other one is I like to do activities focusing on the physical sensations of the body. Mm. Because that starts to teach awareness of sensation and feeling. Mm. And we don't even use the E word. So we're not talking about emotions. We're not talking about those feelings. We're just talking about physical feeling. So again, this idea of moving into the heart, it's kind of moving into the body. Mm. What can you feel? And so if someone can't really get a sense of something, I just ask them, that's when I start asking to follow the breath. Mm. Just pay attention. And for most people, if they're breathing through the nose, they can feel it right on the tip of their nose. Yep. And people listening all of a sudden start to feel that.
Yeah, me too.
There's the implicit suggestion there, right?
Yep.
But you can feel it there. And then eventually, as you become more and more sensitive, you can feel it all the way down and all the way back up again. Mm. So all of a sudden, you're out of your mind. It's still thinking somewhere, but your focus is internal. Mm. And so there are 2 ways in. I mean, there are multitude of ways to go about it, but they're where I start most people.
But we could all learn from that, not just men. You know, I think
that's what I mean. It's for people.
Yeah, we just we thrash ourselves so much. You know, it's almost like we're unconsciously just moving through the day and running through the day. You know, and we don't stop enough, and we don't even do the 2 minutes often. You know, just stop, take 3 deep breaths, and in fact, if only we stopped for like 30 seconds and took 3 deep breaths, you know, that would change everything for us. But we don't.
And it does.
It does. I know.
Like that literally does. It changes your blood chemistry. Yep. It changes everything. That's like, so I used to run a hypnotherapy psychotherapy clinic before I moved into coaching. And the only reason I moved out of it was I didn't like the roles and the expectations of therapist-client, therapist-patient, really. Yeah. So I call it coaching because we're level. Yeah. We're just sitting in space together. I'm your Sherpa. Mm. You know, I'm helping you. I'm climbing the mountain with you.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to fix you because you're not there to be fixed. See, I've gone off on a tangent again, Karen, and I can't even remember what I was going to say.
Fantastic.
But the breathing thing. So one of the things people would come in, I'm anxious or I've got anxiety. Oh, okay, that's beautiful. I don't care what you call it. What's going on? I'm thinking too much. All right, practice this. And it'll be sit down, put your feet on the floor, press your hands together, physical sensation, grounded, boom, take 3 deep breaths. Now look around the room. Now it's a disconnect. It's a circuit breaker. And it worked on all those levels that you were just talking about, thinking about.
Yeah.
We don't need to sit, if something's going wrong, we don't need an hour of meditation to shift it. It's literally 30 seconds. And I've taught people, I'm like, if you're in a boardroom meeting, just put your hands on the table. No one needs to know what you're doing. You don't need to close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths. You don't have to go, but you've centered yourself really quickly.
Making my nose itch.
Brilliant. See, it's working.
I love it. I love it. And so another thing you're doing is teaching men that love, that naughty 4-letter word is actually not a naughty 4-letter word. So why is this why is it such an issue, and why does it need to be taught?
See, because there's this misconception similar to vulnerability that love is weakness. And if you love someone, then you cannot be other than vulnerable. I love my wife dearly. She might not come home one day. She might choose that this relationship's not working for her. I love my children. But something could happen to my children or my relationship with my children. And that's love. And the acceptance of being in love is completely vulnerable. Now, if you can't accept vulnerability, you can't accept love. You can't do love properly. Yeah. Or properly is the wrong word because it sounds a bit judgy, but you can't immerse yourself in the full experience of love. Yeah. So that's the love going outwards, right? You have to be vulnerable to truly love someone. You can't sit on the fence. Yeah. And I mean, I would suggest everyone knows someone, if it's not them, who was half in, half out of a relationship because they didn't want to get hurt. Yep. Or something like that. You have to fully experience it, you've got to jump in. It's back to the special ops soldier. He's vulnerable. Yeah. He might get hurt, he might get killed. Same. But that's why love's difficult, and that's not a man thing. That's across the spectrum. It's just men are better at avoiding love than women are generally. It's a gross generalization. So
do you have much resistance, from
all the time?
Yeah.
All the time. We could add a layer onto love. We add another 4-letter word before it, and then the shit starts to really hit the fan. You start talking about self-love. Yeah. Yeah. Now that's a problem for most men until they start investigating stuff. Yep. Because again, did our dads or our forefathers display any kind of self-love? Not really. But my generation, I don't know anyone who, maybe 1 or 2 men that are like, yeah, okay, my dad was very loving towards us and was loving towards himself, but it's rare. Like you're into single figure percentages. So how do you direct love inwards? Well, there's a challenge again. But I'm not good enough. I don't deserve my own love. I need to be more. I'm not enough. All right, now we're getting into the work. And that's heavy, heavy stuff. That's heavy stuff. And here's the interesting part. How can you really love someone else if you don't love yourself? How can you accept someone else's love for you if you don't love yourself? So that's the big stuff. And yeah, we don't normally jump into that straight away.
No, but it's a big issue, isn't it? Not just for men, like for everybody. No. It's self-love, self-worth, self-value. So, all of that is, I don't know why, because, if you think about our life when it starts, right, and we're a baby, and most people are fortunate enough to have parents who dote over them and tell them that, that's wonderful, so wonderful, yeah. And then, so really we should be by default, we should feel like we're the king of the bloody world, and look at me.
Kings and queens, look at us.
Everybody loves me, that's the thing. But then again, as I'm saying it, I'm thinking, no, but then as soon as we touch the TV, smack, don't touch, and as soon as you start, sit down, be quiet, and then you get to school and it's shush, use shush, I suppose we get beaten out of us, don't we? So we start off.
We really
life.
do.
Yeah.
Well, we could talk for hours and hours upon the current model of schooling and how it's deficient in terms of raising people to be conscious and connected to themselves.
Yeah.
That's a huge one. That's a huge one. I know I learnt most of my stuff that I had to discard and that I'm still working on now. I learnt it explicitly at school, whether it was the bullies in the schoolyard, whether it was the teacher telling me to shut up, whether it was, teachers not being accepting because I'd finish my work fast and I'd do it right and they were expecting something else from me. It was, because you can be the class clown and be the dunce, or you can be too smart for that class and still get treated the same way.
Yeah.
So I was the bored kid because I finished my work and then I'd cause trouble because, I'd probably be given some kind of drug now to calm me down. Yeah. So that's what happens now. You just thought, and then, we don't have it so much in this day and age, but children should be seen and not heard. Shut up at the dinner table. But I catch myself still in patterns that aren't my patterns when I talk to my kids, and I have to bring myself back to my children and sit them down and apologize. I did not mean that. I don't even know where that came from. I'm really sorry. You did nothing wrong.
Yep.
That was all me. And I know sometimes that it's almost too late because I've already taken it in. So all I can do is do better next time.
Yeah.
But I think that's what happened. And then you layer media on top. When I grew up before the internet had kicked off, but all the girls were reading young girl magazines.
Yeah.
And with that is the inherent amount of judgment.
Yeah.
And then boys might be reading martial arts magazines and dudes have got six packs and can kick other people in the head, or their car magazines or footy magazines. And look how amazing all these men are. I can't compete with that. I can't compare to that. And then boom, thank you. We're in the comparison game.
Yeah. And the comparison game is absolutely deadly. It is deadly, but we all do it. It's whether we can pull ourselves back from it. It actually takes a lot of energy and a lot of mental struggle to actually
gymnastics.
Mental gymnastics, that's good, to even recognize that you're doing it, because by default we just do it and we're like, yeah, but so and so, and most of us will go through our lives just blindly not even noticing that we're doing that. And it takes a lot to actually say, hang on a second, or like I said before, hang on a second, that's not bloody true. But we're so reluctant to pull ourselves up because it takes way less energy to be on the I hate myself trail, because we just roll down that hill. We can't do anything.
Well, that's really an interesting thing. I think there's a perception that it's easier because we're used to it.
Yeah.
It's because it's habitual. So, our brains are brilliant with that kind of stuff. Yeah. If we do something over and over and over and over again, we create a habit, there's a neural pathway, it becomes easy. But the amount of energy that's invested in self-loathing and doubt and guilt and all of that bullshit. And I just had a discussion with a very amazing lady about this, about it's actually really simple and not a lot of effort to, I'm changing now.
Yep.
And just doing it or being it in a different way.
Yep.
It's never as much work as you build it up to be.
Yep.
Like I can tell you, like people who are considering whether they want to do coaching work with me, the amount of excuses they will come up with.
Yeah.
And it's never what they give me. It's never about that.
Yeah.
It comes down to, are you ready to make this change or not? And if you are, then the decision becomes, am I your guy or is someone else?
Yep.
Not I don't have time, I don't have money, I'm not ready, I'll do it next year. Oh, the mortgage is due in 2 days. No, none of that is real.
Yeah.
Are you ready to do it now? And have you found the right person? That's it. And see, all of a sudden there's less energy involved in that. And the
Yeah,
decision's easy. The decision's easy. Two things.
Yeah. And I love that you're saying, am I the right guy? Because that's, that's so important. I think that we, and as coaches, we have to be able to say, maybe I'm not your person. Do you, like, instead of trying to grab everybody, some people we just don't connect with. Some people are just not, and that doesn't make them wrong, doesn't make it a bad relationship or a toxic one. It's just that some people we're not going to be the best person for. And it's good for coaches to say, maybe we're not right. But I know Joe over there going, see if he's okay. Because at the end of the day, a genuine coach should want people to find the right person so that we can all flourish. Because the more people on this planet that are flourishing, the closer we're going to get to some kind of, I can live here and I can live in a little bit of peace. That's what we want.
How beautiful that is. But if you get the relationship right and you can build, like they say in NLP, build rapport, but I mean, truly build rapport, build a human connection with someone and trust and compassion.
Yeah.
And that person that you're working with just has faith that you are there to hold space and help them. You're already there.
Yeah.
You're already there. The techniques don't matter anymore. The processes don't matter anymore. You can have everything drawn up by hand rather than some pretty printed out thing that you give to everyone. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yep, I'm with you 100%. It's I believe everything is about relationship. I don't care what anyone says. That's the biggest thing in the world is how do we relate to other people. But anyway, so in the intro, I talked about when I introduced you helping people to live the best life possible. And within that, envelop calmness and contentment. So we're all different. Have you reached a place where that is your best life possible? Like how do we know what is our best life possible, and how does that feel in your opinion? Because you can't talk for everybody.
I can't, but I always approach this in a really general sense, because I think in modern society we're too focused on stuff and things. So success is the car, the yacht, the 3 houses. It's a feeling of being grounded and being okay with things as they are.
Yep.
So $20,000 in debt, but I'm okay with the way things are.
Yep.
Boom, you're living your best life.
Yeah.
Because you've created yourself some space there, the worry's gone potentially, you can work towards removing that debt.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that have got millions, if not billions of dollars and all of the bells and whistles and frills, and they are not, quote unquote, happy.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of using the word happy, because I think what's wrong with sad? Sad's just as valid as happy.
Yeah.
So I would talk about being content.
Yeah.
And content is grounded and okay with what's happening right now, not feeling like I'm missing something.
Yeah. And I like you saying happy and sad and happiness. We're all everyone's chasing happiness. And I remember working in I was a teacher, a VCAL teacher, and there was 3 of us and we're having this conversation, and I said to everyone, what's happy? And they're both looking at me like, what do you mean? Happy's happy. And I'm like, but happy is what? Happy? Like how do we determine what happy is? And so it's a great thing. I love your explanation actually, because you're, rather than saying my best life is doing all the things I want to do and having all the money and doing all much, I love how simplified you're making that. And my best life is not all the haves, but being okay with the have-nots. That this is okay. I can get up every morning. I can sleep well. I've got enough, I'm just at peace. And I think a lot of people could learn from that, because I think that a lot of us are chasing. And that comes back to that comparison thing, but someone else has got that, and with Get Off the Bench, I get people to chase their best life, but it's about what's that thing in here that you just want to do and you're just not doing. It's about that. It's not about chasing everything. It's just about chasing.
No.
What's that one thing that you keep saying, I wish I could, I wish I could, I wish I could, I should have, that just that one thing. But well, this podcast is about I've loved this conversation, by the way, and I hope that most of my listeners are female. However, when we talked about before, men doing work on themselves, it impacts their relationship. So most of these females are going to have a man in their life that is probably not stepping into his vulnerability and not stepping into his heart, and that sort of stuff. So I'd like for them to listen to this and say, I know someone who's doing men's coaching. Maybe, honey, you should,
Yes.
maybe we
Give
should.
this guy a call. He knows stuff.
It's not just about looking at their husband or partner and thinking, oh my God, you really need some men's work, because you're acting like a dickhead and you've been too much on that. It's not about that. It's actually also about looking at your partner and thinking, you're in pain. I see you being in pain because you're not, things hurt you and you don't express it and you don't talk about it and you don't cry. And so I'm sure there's a lot of women who've got a male partner or a male in their life who is or men who have got them up, whatever it is. There's males in people's lives who are sitting there in pain because they're simply not sitting in their heart and expressing themselves. And so
absolutely. And aside from the whole coaching experience, like, men are so unlikely to seek help in a therapeutic context. Like, just so, it's just amazing how there's such a barrier there.
Yeah.
So where do you go to talk?
Yeah.
Where do you let that out?
Yeah.
And there need to be places that are more helpful than the pub over 3 beers or more.
Yeah.
And so, and there are ways, and having these conversations, which is why I'm so deeply thankful for your time and having me, having these conversations allows men and their partners to understand, there are places, there are coaches, there are therapists who will sit, there are men's groups, there are places to have conversations.
Yeah. And if you think about it, men are seeking those places, because you just talked about going to the pub and having 3 beers. They are going there seeking that place, but they're not sharing. They go to men's sheds. Men's sheds are so popular, but they're not sharing. It's almost like they're going there wanting something, but it's not. They're not sharing that sort of stuff. Anyway, okay. So this podcast is Get Off the Bench, to inspire people to back themselves and take action, which you've done many times over. What advice would you give to men who feel a bit stuck, like they know there's a better life, but they feel too blokey to admit that or seek support? There's a lot in that.
Oh, layers. The simple answer, which will not be easy for some men, is ask for help. And it doesn't matter who you ask. And it can be over a beer with your best mate, and just say, mate, I'm in pain. I need help. Will you listen to me?
Yeah.
Or your dad, your uncle, your mum. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be man. And the next step outside, if it's too close to home, go and find a professional. You don't even have to pay for it. There are volunteer services. One of the things I really love, because it's very gentle and it's very supportive, and it's not therapy, I must absolutely stress that it's not therapy, is there are men's circles that are open that you can go and sit in. And your experience will be validated and you will feel normal. Your experience will feel normal. You will listen to other men's stories and they will listen to yours, and you won't be given advice on how to fix it. You'll just be heard.
Yeah.
So investigate how you can ask for help.
And I think when that first man cracks the seal, and says, I need help, the next man will listen, no worries, mate, and give him a cuddle. Do you know what I mean? And just it sort of opens up a whole series of things. It just takes that first one to be vulnerable. And well, hopefully then, people do that, and then they, eventually come around to you and do some deeper work, to really.
That's the stuff I love.
Yeah, because that takes a lot, and that might not be the first move, but it could be. It could be the first move if people have got the ready. And I think it's the pain level. I really want to do this, and I really want things to be better. So I've loved this conversation. Absolutely loved it. I really hope it gets to some men, and really that men listen to it, their partners listen to it, and give it, tell them you need to listen to this conversation. And I really do, because this is not judgmental, but we need more. It's going to sound like I'm picking on men. I'm not, but we need space for more men to be open and vulnerable, where we can just have a lot more gentleness in the world without having to prove all the stuff. It's just, we don't need all the aggression in the world that we're having, simply because boys have inherited that kind of stuff, and then they've grown up believing that they have to be tough and macho and belt people up and everything else. So I think we can have more gentle men in the world. Bring back the old gentleman, word. I think that we would be
in the truest sense.
Yeah, I think we'd be in a much better place. I really do. And I'm not saying that all women are perfect, but anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Adam, where can people find you?
I'm on every social media platform. First name, surname, Adam Stanecki. You spell it the way you say it. It's pretty easy to find. If you type me in, you will find me, because as far as I'm aware, I might be the only Adam Stanecki on the planet right now. And if there's if there's another one, he's in Poland somewhere and he's not on any of the social media channels.
Well, I'm the only Karen Vaughan in the world that I know, so you can type both of us in, and there you go.
There you go.
You might get this.
So my website's adamstanecki.com. So that's probably the easiest way to find me.
And I'm going to put all these links in the show notes anyway, so people can just click on through. And Adam, I have absolutely loved this conversation, and there needs to be more of this type of conversation out in the world, and many, many more beautiful vibes going out and touching people's hearts and opening people's hearts, and what a world we'd have. So thank you so much for your time. I've truly loved it. You're just amazing and wonderful. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. I honestly greatly appreciate this time.
My pleasure. All right. Well, hopefully I'll catch up with you when I come up to Noosa. All right.
Absolutely. It's a date.
All right. Thanks heaps. See ya.
Thank you.